Good morning and welcome to our recording of the Family Meeting Podcast. We're glad you're with us. How has your week been? We want to hear from you, so tell us in the comments what's going on in your life. What's going on in our life?
Well, let's see. We have got Easter coming up. It is actually today, while we're recording this, it is Dairy Queen's Free Cone Day. So to kick off spring, because spring's just around the corner, they give away free ice cream cones. So
Okay.
you can get a free ice cream cone.
We don't have a Dairy Queen near us. It's like 25 minutes away.
Our daughter has a driving test tomorrow, so hopefully she passed.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah. We had it's funny the interactions you have with your kids, because, and I want to know if you have these kind of interactions with your kids as well. We were having breakfast this morning, and one of our daughters was trying to explain to us how her eggs were cooked when she was 2 and the reason she doesn't like them. And I'm like, your eggs were never cooked that way.
Yeah, never.
Like, your mom has been cooking me eggs way before you were even alive or thought of. She's never cooked them that way.
Yeah. I think she must have had eggs when she was little, not when she was 2, but like maybe 5, somewhere else, and didn't like them. And I'm getting the flack for it.
Well, and what was funny is she's like, no, I remember crying, sitting at the table and crying. I'm like, you were always sitting at the table and crying.
That's true, she was. And the funny thing is now she loves eggs. I made her eggs this morning and that's why. And she's like, yeah, when we were little, they never had any seasoning and they were only scrambled and da-da-da-da-da. And we're like, dude, you don't even know what you're talking about.
Yeah. These kids.
But you punished her by eating her.
It's revisionist history.
Yeah. You punished her by eating her toast.
Her little toast. We had toad in the holes.
Egg in a baskets.
What do you call them?
Egg in a baskets. Be right or call it toad in a hole.
No, but here's what happened. And we're going to be talking about marriage and marriages that break up today. So I feel like this is the right time to bring this up.
Okay.
So Lysandra burnt one of the toad in the holes. Yeah. Actually, it was Abigail's. Mm-hmm. And so I was setting up, getting ready for the recording, and Abigail comes and is like, hey, Dad, you want my little toast? It's what we call the little circle that's been cut out.
By the way, I had already made her a new one.
So I'm like, yeah. And then I go to take it, and she shows me the other side that's absolutely just burnt.
She was like, ha ha.
Her replacement had already been made, so I reached down, grabbed her, and everybody's favorite part of it is the little toast.
It's the little toast, yeah.
And I just ate it.
She was so mad, she got on the floor screaming, no, why?
So I had to show her who was boss. You know, mess with the bull, you get the horns. So
yeah, but don't worry, everybody. I made her another piece of toast.
I tried to eat that too, but she was faster than I wanted to be this morning.
We've had a very busy, crazy morning in the Osterkamp home. But
that's just another morning for us.
Yeah.
There's always something going on around here with 4 daughters.
Mm-hmm. We have so much fun.
So hopefully you've had a great morning. Hopefully you're going to have a great week with everything that you have going on in your life. We thank you for making this podcast a part of your week. And I hope that it is an encouragement and a blessing and a help to you in your family relationships. But with that, we need to jump into what we're going to talk about today.
Yep, we sure do.
Gather round, everybody. It's time for a family meeting. The Family Meeting is a show that's all about family relationships. We're the Osterkamps. I'm Thomas, and this is my wife, amazing cook, Chef Lysandra.
Hello, and welcome to our family. Welcome to episode 182 of the Family Meeting Podcast. On today's episode, we're going to talk about divorce.
That was a little, positive. I think that should be more like this, on today's episode, we're going to discuss divorce. Dun, dun, dun.
Okay. Divorce.
Yeah, that's better. But you didn't do the dun, dun, dun.
Dun, dun, dun. All right. We're going to talk about this thing. We're going to do a 3-part series on the 3 leading causes of divorce. And we're going to look at divorce statistics in our nation and look at one of the 3 leading causes for divorce in each episode. And we're going to kind of focus on those. And I think that if we understand divorce, we may be able to better prevent it.
Now, before we jump into today's episode, it is, important to focus in on marriage. We're talking about divorce today.
Yeah.
And we'll get more into that. And the reason we're talking about it is because we love marriage, we believe in marriage, and so we want to do everything that we can do to help marriages. It's one of the main driving forces behind the whole podcast and the family meeting and everything else that we're doing. And we actually wrote a book on it that could be a big help to you and your marriage. And so we encourage you to go get a copy of Happily Never After. Mm-hmm. So whether you are about to get married or you've been married for a long time, I think that it'll be a help to you as you kind of see the worst sides of Lysandra and I, and some of the issues that we have gone through and what we've done to turn things around and change that and build the marriage that we have right now. And so if you just go to familymeeting.org, hit the shop button, and there's a place there where you can get a signed copy of Happily Never After. So head on over there today.
That's right. There are so many sources and articles and statistics out there on divorce and its causes. So when a couple gets divorced, one of the questions that they have to answer on the paperwork, like the legal paperwork, is what is the reason for the divorce? And the number one reason people cite is irreconcilable differences. And that's a very vague, relatively easy answer without much detail. Like you don't have to go into she said this, he did this. So that's vague. That doesn't really help us understand. We probably could do a podcast on irreconcilable differences.
It's so subjective though.
Yes.
Because we're all so different, and we may be willing to give in certain areas and not give in other areas. And so the list of what could be an irreconcilable difference, it's based upon who you are as individuals.
That's right. And more studies have been done to see the real reasons behind those irreconcilable differences. And we're going to look at those reasons just a little bit deeper in the next 3 episodes.
Now, we're going to look at some statistics, right? Key divorce statistics in 2024. This is according to Forbes Advisor. So trends in divorce have changed over time, with the number of people dissolving their unions decreasing, which is...
That's a surprise, right?
That's good.
Until you find out why.
That's good. On the surface. So the divorce rate has decreased from a rate of 4.0 to 2.5 since 2000. Both the marriage and divorce rate have declined over time.
Right. And I think that that's one of the main reasons that the divorce rate has declined is because less people are getting married.
Yeah.
People are just living together. They're swapping partners. They're not making a lifelong commitment. And because of that, there's less divorce. In 2000, so this is according to Forbes Advisor, in 2000, a total of 944,000 divorces and annulments occurred. The divorce rate was 4.00 per population that year. By 2021, it had fallen to 2.5 per 1,000 population, with just 689 people divorcing that year. Thank you. Yeah, 689,000 people divorcing that year. The marriage rate has declined too, dropping from 8.2 per population in 2000 to 6.00 per population in 2021. So fewer people are getting married. And it makes me wonder if people who are raised in a divorced home, like with parents who are divorced, if they're like, I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
I'm not doing that. And marriage is hard. Like marriage, you are making a commitment. It's legal. It's a spiritual commitment, and it's hard. And so it makes me wonder if that's one reason why people are not getting married.
Well, and I think another factor that you have to consider is the rising cost in the standard of living. It's so much harder to get a start today.
That's true.
With the expense of everything. I mean, the last few years, housing costs have skyrocketed. The cost for just normal stuff, food and all the stuff has gone way up. And so, it's a lot harder to just, hey, we'll get married and we'll figure it out when you feel like the financial burden is just so high. But when we're talking about specifically about divorces, one of the things we do know that is that has been studied and researched is once you've had a divorce, it gets that much easier to have and go through divorce again. Mm-hmm. And so third marriages have the highest divorce rate at 73%.
That is very high.
So, people talk about, well, 50% of marriages end in divorce. Well, that's true of first marriages. And that statistic is basically true whether you are a Christian or a non-Christian, which I find absolutely just heartbreaking. I feel like a Christian should, that number should be way lower, but it's not. And so those who wed multiple times face a far higher rate of divorce, 67% for second marriages and then 73% for third marriages. And so you talk about, okay, let's look at who's getting married now. So 40% of new marriages include a partner who is remarrying. The majority of marriages are first marriages for both partners. So it's about 60-40 split there. So 20% of unions involve one person who's been married before, while another 20% are repeat marriages for both parties.
Okay. One of the leading causes listed in surveys and polls is a lack of commitment. So that's one of the leading causes. So we're talking about what is divorce, why are people getting divorced, what are the statistics, and then in each episode for this one and the following two, we're going to take one of those leading causes and we're going to talk about it a little bit. So one of the top reasons for divorce is lack of commitment, which is interesting because when I say leading cause of divorce, honey, what is like one of the first things that come to your mind, or the first few things? What would you guess without studying it?
Infidelity and finances.
Okay. Yeah.
Money.
Me too. Those are the two that I thought of. And this is right up there with those.
Yeah.
Lack of commitment, which is really interesting in all these studies. So this is the one that we're going to talk about and focus on today.
Well, and part of that I think just has to do with the way a lot of people view marriage today. They don't view it as a lifelong covenant with each other. Mm-hmm. And I know you're going to share some verses in just a second here. But really the view that many people have of divorce today is the same view that they had when Jesus was talking here in Matthew 19, where basically for almost any reason, people just split up today.
Right.
And there's just not that commitment to understand once we get married, those vows actually mean something when we say to death do us part.
Right. And I think a lot of people view marriage almost like dating. Like, I'm going to stick with you as long as it works out. When it doesn't work out, we'll go our separate ways. We'll live our lives, and it's a very casual view of marriage and relationships. But maybe you're asking, what does God say about divorce? Am I allowed to get a divorce? What if I already did? And I know many of you out there, based on these statistics that we've just read, you have had a divorce.
Yeah.
You are in a second marriage or a third marriage, maybe. Maybe you are a child who grew up in the home of divorced parents, or I should say the homes of divorced parents. And you're just wondering, like, what does God say? Am I a second-class citizen now? Am I not as good as people who have not been divorced? And we're going to go into that. But before we do, let me just say, no, you are just as good as everyone else. There are no second-class citizens. God is not a respecter of persons. He loves you as much as he loves someone who has been married for 60 years. So there is no difference there. God's love for you will never change.
Right.
We want you to know that up front, but we are gonna go into this and we are gonna talk a little bit more about it. But let's see what Matthew has to say about divorce, what we find Jesus talking about here in a conversation he has but with some Pharisees. Now, the Pharisees are the religious leaders. These are the guys, the holier than thous. Do you know one? Do you know one of those? They really have it all together, or at least they believe they do. They are religious and they're going to shove it in their face that they are so close to God. And here they want to trip up Jesus. And what better topic to trip up Jesus than divorce? Because a lot of people have different views of divorce. So that's what they choose to ask him about. And here we go in verse 3, and we're going to go through verse 10. And the Pharisees came up to him and tested him, that is Jesus, by asking, "Is it lawful to divorce one's wife for any cause?" And he, Jesus, answered, "Have you not read that he who created them from the beginning made them male and female? And said, therefore shall a man leave his father and his mother and hold fast to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh." And there Jesus quotes from the Old Testament. "So they are no longer two, but one flesh. What therefore God has joined together, let not man separate." And they, that's the Pharisees, said to him, Jesus, "Why then did Moses command one to give a certificate of divorce and to send her away?" So they're thinking, oh, we've got him now. He's tripped up, he's trapped now. Verse 8, Jesus said to them, "Because of your hardness of heart, Moses allowed you to divorce your wives, but from the beginning it was not so. And I say to you, whoever divorces his wife except for sexual immorality and marries another commits adultery." And the disciples said to him, these are his followers now, "If such is the case of a man with his wife, it's better not to even get married."
Yeah. And you look at this portion of scripture, and it is important for us to understand the context of the day. And one of the things you've got to understand is wives were basically looked at as property.
Which is not right.
And so they did not have the legal standing to get a divorce. Now, a man could divorce his wife for whatever reason. So whether it's, hey, she burnt the toad in the hole.
Yeah.
And we were telling our YouTubers about a story that happened this morning with one of our daughters. It was just basically any reason. If she was no longer pleasing to your eyes, if you were displeased with her for whatever reason, you could get a divorce.
And it just shows the lack of value they had on women, too, because this is going to keep women in line. The women are going to behave themselves so they don't get divorced, which makes the man, this supreme lord in his house, and he gets whatever he wants whenever he wants it, or you might get divorced. So,
yeah. And one of the things you find Jesus doing is you find Jesus elevating the prominence and position of women everywhere he goes. And I think as Christians, we need to do the exact same thing. And so in the conversation, they're asking him, can you get divorced for any other reason? And Lysandra mentioned they're trying to trip up and trap Jesus and get him to say something that they can use to incriminate him. And he doesn't do that. But one of the things he talks about is God's original intent for marriage. His design is one man, one woman, one lifetime. Like that's the design. And I think that is the intent that we need to approach marriage. Now, as Lysandra mentioned, if you have been divorced or your parents have been divorced, you grew up in a divorced home or whatever else, it doesn't matter if it's your first marriage or your 8th marriage, Elizabeth Taylor. We should approach our marriage with a high view and with a total commitment. And that's one of the things that surprised the disciples in the conversation. As Jesus is saying, hey, it's one man, one woman for one lifetime. And he goes ahead and gives a stipulation, if there's infidelity. Now, he's not saying just because there is infidelity that you should get a divorce. But he's saying, all right, if you want to talk about reasons why you might get a divorce, infidelity would be the reason. And he doesn't speak to physical abuse and all of that, but as you know, if you listen to the podcast at all, we always say get out of that situation. So God is not asking you to remain in a marriage that is abusive.
Right. So
we're not saying that either. We're just talking about what Jesus actually said. So he goes on to say, and Jesus had a high view of marriage. He looked at it, with the utmost respect and reverence, and understood, hey, this is supposed to be a lifelong commitment. This is what you're vowing to each other. It's not just signing a piece of paper. This is a covenant you are making with another person before God. And when the disciples hear that, they say, you know what, man, maybe if this is really the case, it'd be better not to get married. Like, that's the high view of marriage. It was almost like shocking to them that would be the only reason that you couldn't get a divorce.
It almost sounds like they're saying, no woman is good enough to stay with for the rest of your life. I'd rather just not get married because I'd be stuck with her.
Well, I don't know about that, but it's just, it is such a huge commitment.
Yeah.
And that's what Jesus is emphasizing, is this is a lifelong commitment that you're making. And a lot of people do have a hard time with that. Like, they have a hard time making it a lifelong commitment. And so when you think about what he's talking about here, he doesn't say, if you get divorced, your life is over. If you get divorced, then you're somehow less than somebody else. He's talking to a culture of people where a lot of them had been divorced many times. So it would be a culture similar to ours, where a lot of people have been divorced. So I do want to make sure you understand that if you're listening to this, you say, well, I've already been married and I've been divorced maybe once, maybe twice, maybe more. I'm never going to have that lifelong commitment with somebody. You know, I'm somehow less, and we can't have that relationship that you kind of think about as somebody who's got your back for all your life. I'm here to tell you, you can. Mm-hmm. And whatever state you find yourself in, whether you're about to get married, whether you're married for the very first time, or whether you've been divorced and married multiple times, we need to change the way that we look at marriage, to look at it the way that Jesus looked at it, and the way that he taught about it, is having a high view of it and going into it with total commitment.
Absolutely. And this is another reason why it's so important to teach this to our children as well, because they should be very careful who they marry. If you are looking at it like a lifelong commitment, which is what Jesus intended it to be, then you want to think twice before you marry just anybody, because you're talking about spending forever with them. And it's hard.
Yeah.
It is hard. I mean, like, okay, so we were just having this conversation at our church's ladies' night, and we have our lesson, and then we have discussion questions around the table to kind of make the lesson personal. And two of the people at our table were talking about, one was a woman whose daughter is in college, so the daughter was not there, and one was a college girl who was sitting at the table. And both of these college girls are having a terrible time with roommates at college. And they're like, man, they're just casually talking, the mom and then this other girl. It's so hard to live with somebody. It's so scary to get a roommate. You never know what you're going to get. And it's like, yeah, now imagine that you're signing up to live with that person for the rest of your life.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, it's hard. It is really difficult to find that person that you can stand living with, because cohabitating is difficult. I mean, they affect every part of your life, and it can be great and it can be terrible. So that's why we need to be teaching this to our kids. Like, marriage is a lifetime commitment. You're saying you're going to live with them forever, even when they annoy you, even when they don't treat you well, even when it's really, really tough to love them. And so we need to really be thinking about how serious this is, and teaching that to our children and exemplifying it in our own marriage. So lack of commitment is a leading cause of divorce. Why? Why is it the leading cause, or one of the leading causes? And my opinion is it has to do with our culture's low value of marriage. Marriage is just about being together for a while. And I think even in our secular culture, people believe that marriage is to be monogamous in general. Like, most people believe, like, when you get married, if you have sex with someone else, or even an emotional affair, you've cheated on me and it's a bad thing. In general, most people believe that.
Yeah.
Even whether they're Christian or they're not. But yet, it's not necessarily forever. So I'm going to be faithful to you. They're committing. I'm going to be faithful. It's just going to be me and you as long as it works out. As long as we get along, as long as you're nice to me, as long as I'm still in love with you. And they'll say things like that you can fall in and out of love with people. But this lack of commitment, it's not forever. It's just as long as it works out or as long as I am enjoying myself. And if that was the case and that's how we viewed marriage, I would have divorced you a very long time ago.
Yeah.
Would you have divorced me a long time ago?
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that was one of the questions I was going to ask you is because there have been times where literally the thing that kept me in the marriage was my commitment to marriage itself.
Me too.
Like
no doubt.
I came into marriage. We both came into marriage as this is a lifelong commitment with each other. And we have had conversations about, if one of us was unfaithful to the other, what do we think we would do? And obviously we don't know if we've not been in it, but we came in viewing it as, no, this is a lifelong commitment. And we had that view before we ever got married. I mean, Lysandra, after one of my angry outbursts, literally was like, I'm not going to marry you if this is who you're going to be. And the reason she said that is because she had a high view of marriage. Like, this is a lifelong commitment that I'm making to you before God. And it wasn't just like, oh, well, if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out.
Right.
But you touched on something, and I think it's one of the reasons why, you talked about why a lack of commitment. And part of the lack of commitment, I think, just comes from not really having a good understanding of what love actually is.
Yes.
The culture looks at love like it's some sort of feeling that can be found or lost. Mm-hmm. And it's not. Love is a choice that you make. You choose to love people, whether you feel like it or not. And there are days and times where I absolutely, most of the time, I feel strong feelings of love for Lysandra. But believe it or not, there's times where this amazing woman who's sitting next to me on the podcast, I don't really have those feelings of love. At certain times, certain things going on or whatever else. Do I love her still? Yes, I choose to love her in those moments. Now, if we were to ask her, and I'll go ahead and ask you, you probably have a lot more of those times where you don't feel those loving feelings towards me than I do for you.
It's really hard to say.
That's a yes.
No, there are absolutely times. And I know, I mean, we've heard it so many times where people come up to us and are like, oh, you guys have the perfect marriage. Oh, you're so lucky or whatever, because we have the perfect marriage. Listen, dudes, we don't have the perfect marriage. I absolutely look at Thomas sometimes and think like, why did I marry him?
It's a lot. That happens a lot.
Not very often. But there are times when I'm like, oh, I wish I wouldn't have even married this guy.
It used to happen a lot more than it does now.
Yeah, you've really grown a lot, and so have I. But there are times when I don't feel love towards him. Now, it's not the majority of the time, thank God. It's here and there when he does certain things or doesn't do certain things or treats me a certain way or whatever. Those are the times when I'm like, but it's my commitment to marriage and to what is right. And then also I choose to love you, like you said. Yeah, I choose.
And ultimately the choosing to love is part of that commitment.
Absolutely.
Commitment of marriage, but it's also a commitment as far as who we are as followers of Jesus. Mm-hmm. Because his command to us is this: love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And then he said the second command is like it: love your neighbor as yourself. Mm-hmm. He goes on and talks about loving your enemies. I don't know anybody that has strong, loving feelings towards their enemies. And I'm talking about people, and it hopefully it's rare in your occasion, but we've had it for us as well. People who literally want to ruin our lives, mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. who lie about us and all these other things. I have never had strong feelings of love towards those people, ever. But do I choose to love them anyway?
Yes.
I try to, because that's what I've been commanded to do as a follower of Jesus. And so that's part of the commitment we're talking about. Why is there such a lack of commitment? And part of it is just not having the right view of marriage, because our culture doesn't have the right view of marriage, and then also not having the right view of love.
That's right. We get confused about what love is. And that's a lot of what we talk about in our book, Happily Never After, is we explain, like, listen, here's the fights we had. Here's the stuff that we did. Here's how poorly we treated one another. And we're still married now. And you can too. You can be married too. Because sometimes I think we look at people and we think, oh, they've been married 50 years. It's because he's a good guy and she's a really good woman. You guys, no, it's not. She is a sinful person and he is a sinful person. And what they've done is they've committed to each other. They've committed to God. They've committed to marriage, and they've chosen to love one another through thick and thin, through the worst and the best.
Yeah. And so we need to get back to that view where marriage is absolutely forever. And you think about what Jesus said here. We're going to go back to his words. And this goes all the way back to Genesis, all the way back to Adam and Eve, as Jesus is quoting here, where he says in verse 5, "Therefore a man shall leave his father and his mother, hold fast to his wife." I like the good old-fashioned King James word of cleave to each other. And that is,
it's a strong word.
The fact that they're so closely united, they can no longer be separated, not without a lot of pain and heartache and all those. They've become one, okay? It says the two shall become one flesh. And then Jesus goes on and says this, so they are no longer two, but one flesh. And then he makes this statement, what therefore God has joined together, let not man separate. And you will have pastors and officiants often say that at the end as they pronounce them man and wife. What God has joined together, let not man put asunder, or let not man separate. And that's the view that Jesus had, was, hey, marriage is absolutely forever, and we need to get back to that thinking and that idea of what marriage should be. Marriage is a lifelong commitment. Marriage should be forever. That's the way that we should look at it.
Right. And you are not a bad person if you've been divorced. You are not, your parents aren't bad people if they've been divorced. It's not that. But divorce really does so much damage. It hurts so many people. And if your parents were divorced, you know this because you went through it. And the reason it hurts so much is because when people get married, they become one. And when you divorce, you are tearing apart one thing. You are tearing apart that single entity and making it two again. And it's painful to rip that apart. And it hurts. And it goes into all aspects of life. It affects children, parents. It affects siblings. It affects cousins. It affects a church. It affects your coworkers. Like, it affects everything. It affects your finances. It affects your style of living. Like, everything is affected by divorce. It is painful. It hurts. And so I know maybe some of you are sitting there and you're saying, yeah, but my marriage sucks. My husband sucks. My wife is horrible. I can't stand them. Divorce hurts too. Divorce sucks too. Like, let's put some effort into what we already have rather than going for what may seem like the easy way out. We need to start looking at marriage as forever.
Well, and here's the intent of this whole series is not to make anybody feel bad about their current circumstances or the way they grew up or whatever else. The goal of the marriage is to, whatever situation we find ourselves in right now in this moment, as far as your relationship is concerned, is to elevate your view of marriage, to make a choice that you are all in with your life, that you are fully committed, and that, hey, thick and thin, better or worse, richer or poorer, this is going to be till death do us part.
That's right. Okay, so maybe your marriage is horrible and it's really tough. We want to encourage you to do what you can do to make it better. So listening to podcasts like this, reading books on marriage, going to counseling, all of those things can help you. But one thing that we do want to help you to understand is your marriage isn't the only marriage that sucks. Your marriage isn't the only one that's had problems. You can overcome it. So keep that in your mind.
Yeah.
And if you look at marriage like, I won't leave this marriage. So not I can't leave this marriage, because you can. Any of us can leave our marriage at any time. We can go down and we can file the paperwork and we can get it started. But we start looking at it like, I won't leave this marriage. Then your only option becomes to work to better your marriage. Okay? So you're not saying, I'm just going to let him mistreat me. I'm just going to let her ignore me. No, it's not that. You're going to work on the marriage. You're going to work to make it better. You're going to pray for your spouse. You're going to invest in them, not just in your marriage, but you're going to invest in your spouse. You're going to do everything you can do to be the most amazing, perfect spouse you can be to your husband or wife, because you can't change them, but you can change yourself, and you can invest in your marriage because you have already said, I won't leave this marriage. And like we said, that's what we did.
Yeah.
Because we didn't have a great marriage, okay? We didn't. In fact, when my dad read our book, Happily Never After, he came to me and he's like, I had no idea it was so bad. He really felt bad. And because
He's like, why didn't you tell me?
Why didn't you tell me? I'm like,
well, you didn't need more reasons to hate my husband.
Pretty much. But we also talk about, don't talk to your parents about how horrible your spouse is. They won't be able to forgive him, but you will. So I never talked to my parents about our fights or our problems. And so they had no idea that it was as bad as it was. But that's what I want you to understand is like every marriage out there has stuff that's like really, really bad happening. A lot of arguments, a lot of fights, people mistreating each other. All of that stuff is happening. Don't give up though. Now, of course, the exception is abuse. If you are being physically, emotionally, sexually abused, please get out of that as quick as possible.
Now, yes.
Just leave, get out. We're not telling you to stay in an abusive marriage. We're telling you to stay in a bad marriage.
Yeah. Yeah, those are two different things.
Those are different things. We're saying stay in your bad marriage and work on it. What can you do? So rather than looking at like, how can I get out of this? Let's change that thinking to say, what can I do? What can I do to make this better? And it's nothing is going to be like waving a magic wand and poof, you have a happily ever after. It's going to be slow, tiny baby steps. You're going to face annoying work, chipping away. And sometimes you're the only one working on the marriage.
Yeah.
It feels that way. Might not be true.
Yeah.
It can feel like I'm the only one trying to make this marriage better. I'm the only one trying to be a better spouse. That may not be true. It may just be how you feel, but keep at it either way. Keep at it.
So I want you to think about your marriage commitment level and where it's at.
Okay.
And here's what I'm asking you to do. I'm asking you to commit to your marriage with more fervor than some of you ladies do a hairstyle.
Ooh.
Some of you have had that hairstyle for way too long.
We're committed to it.
You are committed to it. You've got a lifelong commitment to your hairstyle, but for some reason we don't have that same view of marriage.
True. It's funny, but it's true, you guys.
Or what about this for the fellas? Your sports team. Because I think about the commitment level I have to my sports teams.
Yeah, you're
First
a
of all,
Hawkeye forever.
Detroit Lions, one of the worst teams in the NFL my entire life. Mm-hmm. We went 0-16, won no games. Guess what? Still a Detroit Lions fan.
Yep.
Even though they totally blew it this year, should have been in the Super Bowl. I think they literally wanted to lose that game.
Rabbit trail, baby.
But I'm committed to. Iowa Hawkeyes have disappointed me more times than I can count. Absolutely just heartbreaking.
Sounds like marriage.
It can be, for sure. But what I'm saying is I'm still an Iowa fan. Like, I've got my Iowa sweatshirt on literally.
The Hawkeyes right now.
Right now.
You bleed black and gold.
And Caitlin Clark got us so close to a women's basketball championship last year. March Madness starts this weekend. I'm excited to see. We won't talk about the men's team and how horrible they're doing, but still a Hawkeye fan, right? We're committed to that kind of stuff. You're committed to a hobby. Mm-hmm. Like, I've got a mobile game on my phone I've been playing for 6 years.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
I love you.
Exactly.
I choose to love you.
But you've got the hobbies. You should be more committed to your marriage than your sports team, your hobby, your church, your children. Yeah, I said children.
That's right.
Your friends. More than your other family.
More than your career. Some people are so committed to their career. Like the goal is the promotion. The goal is to please the boss. The goal is to make the money.
Yeah.
And that's the lifelong commitment. And they'll do anything to make sure that career is succeeding.
Constantly working, constantly being educated, constantly trying to move up the ladder and get better and more efficient and
That's
whatever
commitment.
else. Like, we're asking you to be more committed to your marriage than you are all of those things. And you should be. I mean,
Yes.
this is the person that you said. Nobody had a gun up to your head and forced you to say you love them, that you would be with them through thick and thin, death to us part, all this stuff. No, you said this. This is the commitment you made. What I'm asking you to do is to actually live up to that commitment.
That's right.
Like, it was never your job. You didn't sign an agreement that says, I'm going to work at this place till death do I part. Like, no, you didn't do that. And yet we're more committed to this job. We're more committed to this team than we are to our spouse and to our marriage. And that just shouldn't happen.
Right. That's right. God intended your marriage to be till death do you part. This should be your intention too. Rather than jumping ship too quickly, let's be committed to making our marriage work and investing in our relationship and investing in our spouse.
And so that means, as Lysandra said, that means that we're going to go to church together. It means we're going to spend time going to marriage retreats, marriage conferences. We're going to read books together and podcasts, and we're going to sit down and talk about it. It means we're going to be committed to having at least weekly family meetings. And so with the family meeting you're going to have tonight is just you and your spouse. And literally just asking them the question, how committed am I to our marriage in your opinion?
That's a good question.
So, do you feel like I'm more committed to anything else than I am to our marriage? And literally giving in some of these suggestions that we talked about. Do you feel like I'm more committed to church?
That's not good.
To our
That's
marriage?
not good, people.
Do you feel like I'm more committed to my sports team or my golf game or my salon than I am to our marriage? The only thing you should be more committed to than your marriage is to Jesus.
Yep.
Like, that's it. Other than that, like, marriage should be first. And so having that conversation, and once again, this is one of those conversations where I'm not going to interrupt. I'm not going to be defensive. I'm not going to try to make excuses. I'm just going to ask the question, give some suggestions, and then I'm going to listen to what they have to say. And then, all right, if they're ready to have this conversation, then we're flipping the coin now. Okay, this is how I feel about how committed you are to our marriage relationship. And the point of having the conversation is to basically recommit to your spouse. If you have been more committed to something else or someone else other than your marriage and to your spouse, then it's a time to own it and just say, you know what? I have been more committed to my job than I have to our marriage. I've spent more time at work than I have at home. I never miss a day of work, but I miss vacation. I miss time away with the family. I miss an anniversary, like I missed your birthday. And just owning that. And I'm sorry. Can't go back and change what I've already done. I'm sorry. And I'm making a commitment right now to you, to God. And maybe it's literally going back over your vows, your marriage vows, and saying, you know what, I haven't lived up to it, but I'm going to. Till death do us part. I am 100% committed to you and to you alone. And that's the kind of the family meeting tonight, is just to a recommitment. Just like Lysandra and I, 20 years, we this past summer, August 2nd, went down to the beach, 20 years, and we renewed our vows. I mean, you don't need to have some big ceremony to renew your vows. You can sit down on the couch or driving down the road or at a restaurant together and have that recommitment. So that's the family meeting this week.
Thanks for joining us today. Please go and subscribe to the Family Meeting Podcast from your favorite podcast provider. And if you found this information helpful, please share this episode on social media and invite your friends and family to listen in with you.
To find more content and information Lysandra and I provide, you can go to our website, familymeeting.org, or email us at info@familymeeting.org. If you'd like to shoot us a text or call us, you can send a voice message at 904-257-3062.
And we want to invite you to join us for our next family meeting as we talk about another leading cause of divorce, money.
Yeah.
Whoa, so true, right? Oh my goodness. We're going to talk about why money issues are such a cause of contention and why they can lead to divorce.
Thanks for joining us today for this family meeting. Have a great week, everybody. This meeting is adjourned.
Divorce makes me sleepy.
It really makes the YouTubers feel special when you yawn.
I love you guys. Sorry. Don't take it personally. I always tell everybody that when I yawn right in their face. Don't take it personally. It's me. It's not you.
Yeah. She literally means it.
Yeah.
It is you.
So let's talk about our commitment level. Put in the comments 100%, 50%, 20%. How committed are you to marriage in general? Even if you aren't married right now, maybe you have lost a spouse, maybe you are divorced. What is your level of commitment to marriage right now in your life? What would you say? Where would you put it?
Yeah, and I love that because even if you're not married, you can have a high view of marriage. Mm-hmm. I think about a young lady. We're going to be doing her wedding in less than a couple of weeks here. And she really just felt like she was not going to get married. And she had a high view of marriage. She wanted a high class person to go through life with, and she would not lower her standards at all. And then God just brought along an amazing guy for her. And so even if you're not married, you can still have that high view of marriage, and you should have that high view of marriage. So
yeah. And pass that on to our kids. Thanks for joining us for this week's recording of the Family Meeting Podcast. We will see you next week.